it started with the founders. If the companies put emphasis on continuing education, training their workforce, committing to really valuing the education journey and skill development journey that its employees want to have, then, the return on that is enormous.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Haresh Singhani. This is Conversations with Haresh. We'll be talking to people of varied backgrounds, covering various topics. I'm very excited to be able to share these with you. The goal is to increase curiosity and empathy amongst all of us to help us grow professionally and personally at all levels. And of course, we also want to make sure that this is fun. So thank you again, and we'll look forward to having you. Good morning, Arron. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Conversations.
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. And I see you got your spring red shirt on. It must be a little bit warmer in Seattle where we are.
I do spend a lot of time on the road. So right now I'm down in Southern California, where it is in fact quite a bit sunnier.
Oh, awesome. Okay. And that's, I think your head offices are that way, right? For the company. Is that right? Where you were at?
I work at Mythical Games, yeah, and we have offices in a couple of different locations. We have one in Westwood down near LA. We have one in Ballard in the Seattle area, and then we have one in Lisbon, Portugal, where we have a significant engineering presence.
Okay, awesome. Well, again, welcome, and I'm glad we could do this. As I was mentioning a little bit earlier, we'll start off by getting an introduction, where you'd like to start, personal, professional journey, etc. Tell us a little bit about your work that's happening, how success has come. Then we'll talk about setbacks, how you enable yourself and others to kind of think through those, etc. And then we'll also get into a little bit of the personal side, Arron as a person, what's interesting, maybe some of it's still in work, but some outside of work. Maybe let's start with an introduction.
I'm an open book. I love what you do, by the way. I love your podcast. I think it's incredible to just be able to bring together different people from different walks of life to be able to kind of share some of their collective wisdom. So very, very thankful to be here today. Happy to share a little bit about myself. As you might be able to see just from, where I work, I pretty much am an open book. I've been in the games business for a couple of decades now. I want to say, the gray hair in my beard suggests that it's been about, nearly 30 years of my life have spent in some form or another in the games and platform, technology industries. The reason why I use all those words together is because the longer I'm in this industry, the more these types of things have been coming together. I think when I first started gaming as a player, these were offline experiences. They were done on very specific hardware with very specific time in between getting my homework done and, doing my chores at home. And now, we've sort of evolved the space between gaming and television and entertainment into sort of this version of what I call interactive entertainment, which is, experiences that you can have on literally any device that you may have with you in some form or another and have high quality entertainment experiences, wherever you might be or whatever, life phase that you might be in. It's a wonderful time to be alive if you're into some of the things that I'm into, Star Trek, Star Wars, lots of science fiction. Do a fair amount of 3D printing. I spend a lot of time outdoors as well. And interactive digital fitness has been something that, recently picked up during the pandemic. And all these things kind of come together for me, not just personally, but also professionally, the types of roles that I've had and the types of opportunities that I pursue.
Wow. Okay, awesome. And did you start out on the tech side or the business side when you were having your earlier roles?
Well, starting all the way back, I'd say my first job was I did a paper route. So that's decidedly not digital. I like to start with that.
But it is content.
It's content. It's also operations. It turns out that, there's a logistics skill that you develop as a 13-year-old, when you have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and make sure that you deliver newspapers to your customers in the way that they like to have their news delivered to them at the right times. And
what city was that, by the way?
That was in a small town in eastern Washington state. Happy to say that that's shifted entirely online now. But, as with all technology innovations, it did put some people out of work. The idea that you would have 13-year-olds delivering papers is no longer a thing, but it did open the door to many other opportunities for those 13-year-olds to make a living. And so I'd love to talk about that because I think at every technology innovation, there's this like worry that, oh, it's going to put people out of work. And I think that that's a legitimate concern, but I think that we've proven over and over again that what it really does is it opens opportunities for brand new ways for people to sort of shift their skills, their affinity towards things that perhaps even more productive than what they were doing before. And I embrace that. Probably get the sense that I'm this radical optimist in many senses of the word.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it's better to be that. I think it's funner at least as consumer of your own content, right?
Yeah. If you see challenges as just a world of opportunities, and kind of think about, yeah, this might be hard. It might be difficult, but what does it present to us that I may not have thought about before? And it's pretty exciting when you approach challenges and problems in that manner, at least in my view.
I'm probably more like you than not, but I guess I'm a little bit more aware of the other side of it, which is, what do we do with the people who may be at a point in their careers or lives where they're not as easily able to pick up new skills or new domains? And if their work gets affected or impacted by automation, or for a while it was mechanical automation, but now with AI, it's going to be knowledge workers, right? More and more of us who might consider ourselves knowledge workers that are going to be needing to shift how we add value to the ecosystem. Any thoughts on how we enable a transition to these technologies and platforms, which are going to require us to shift how we add value?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Like I go back to perhaps draw from my own journey, starting out as an entrepreneur, paper route delivery into the service industry, into retail. You ask how I got my start in gaming, and I'll say I joined a startup called Wizards of the Coast back in the late 90s. And I joined to help expand the retail offering. So I worked in retail stores to sell games and entertainment experiences to people, and sort of made the shift to the technology side as we shifted that business to online, direct to consumer. And we developed the world's first digital trading card game. And so if I had known about that journey in the late 90s, I may have chosen a different path in terms of what I was trying to major in college, or I may have actually even stayed in college. At the time, I dropped out at one point to sort of pursue this passion. I eventually went back and got a couple of degrees. But the thing that taught me about answering your question is that you've got to be a lifelong learner. The notion that you need to pay attention to the changes and the opportunities that those changes present before you is critical. Like I said, I started out as a retail professional helping expand retail stores for an analog game company. That analog game company has shifted to digital games. Those retail stores closed within 5 or 6 years. And, I, instead of just closing along with them, had to go and seek new skills and stay hungry and stay focused on learning the necessary things that I needed to learn in order to continue to pursue these amazing opportunities. And there were plenty of them. I think in that job, I had 11 bosses, 9 different roles, and, I eventually became the chief information officer for that division. It's essentially the vice president of technology. And, I had to go back to school twice. I got a computer science degree. I got a master's in business because I could see that those were going to be needed skills, and I decided to put the effort in to make the shift.
Okay. And at a systematic level, right, or if you will, at the government level or society level, right? Are there things you could do better to help people do what sounds like maybe you had some natural skills or you had the personality to continuously want to learn new domains, new things, or evolve or adapt. But maybe not all of us are equally motivated or equipped and so on to continue to do that. Are we as a society, do you think, doing a decent job to enable that, or do we need to improve?
Oh, I think there's always room for improvement in this front. Like, my personal beliefs are that we underinvest in education as a whole, as a society. I think the emphasis that we should place on education opportunities for not just the young, but also for those that, want to continue that journey well into their careers, it could use significant increase in attention, in value as a society, and of course, in the financial support that we can provide it. I did have a number of very fortunate opportunities, and I like to say that there is luck involved in pursuing some of these things. But the thing about luck is it's opportunity times preparedness. And I think the preparedness is on me. staying vigilant, in keeping myself open to new possibilities. But, the opportunity, as we were describing it, needs to be supported by society in a much better way. It needs to be valued. It needs to be embraced as something that is essential and frankly has widespread economic benefits attached to it. When you allow people additional opportunities to try new things and to receive education and be a part of that journey, throughout their careers, not just at the beginning of their careers, the economic impacts of that are very, very significant. And I think that, as a society, we could do a much better job of putting programs in place to support that.
I see. Obviously, it's a big topic, and there's, a lot of people with a lot of opinions and a lot of influence as to how we do this. I guess if I was to take a stab at the same question, right, I think we do a decent job during a person's kind of early years, right? Getting educated and then keeping them updated for the first, whatever that number is, 5, 10, 15 years. But I'm not sure how good we are with helping late career individuals kind of shift their work streams. Maybe that's a challenge that all societies struggle with, right? And it's a challenge that, as you get older, right, it's just harder to pick up new skills and stuff. And then you have obligations and responsibilities that you have to juggle. So I have to pay the mortgage and I have to take care of other expenses and so on. So I can't quit working to retrain myself. Or maybe I can if the government had certain programs, I suppose, where I still make some income, but I'm not working other than retaining myself.
Well, I mean, I can describe a little bit about my personal experience. Like I said, I spent a lot of time at Wizards of the Coast, and it was, as a startup, it was purchased by Hasbro, and Hasbro is a company. I think they're close to celebrating 100 years in the business at this point. The founder of Wizards, a guy named Peter Atkinson, he strongly believed, as I do, in the investment in continuing education. And they had a program that survived the Hasbro acquisition for a number of years before I think it was eventually scaled back a little bit. Unfortunately, was, they'll pay for a significant portion of college for its, employees. And so I took advantage of that. And in fact, I kind of was scratching my head when I became aware of this benefit, because not very many people were using it. It's available. And in some cases, it'll pay for 100% of a 4-year degree at one point. And same with my master's degree. And I was able to do both while continuing my career there. And in fact, what it did is a number of beneficial things. I mean, I stayed with the company for a long time. I was able to add significantly more value to the organization, at least I hope I did, since joining as a retail specialist and ending as a vice president of technology, which I carried into my jobs at Activision Blizzard and at Meta and now at Mythical. So I think for me as a person, it was an amazing opportunity. And I think that it started with the CEO. It started with the founders. If the companies put emphasis on continuing education, training their workforce, committing to really valuing the education journey and skill development journey that its employees want to have, then, the return on that is enormous. And so I strongly advocate for companies taking more responsibility for improving this as a society rather than just government. I think government, I'm not going to ever get political, but I'll say that, government struggles to proactively identify these types of opportunities and properly invest. I mean, it's a giant moving machine. It's very, very slow to make changes. Companies, I think, could definitely, especially innovative CEOs, could definitely see the value in it much, much faster.
I guess so. The answer is a combination of factors. So individually, you have to be prepared. Maybe employers can play a bigger role or enable an environment where it's easier for me, if I am prepared or motivated, etc., to pick up new skills or to retrain myself. And then sounds like, government could do everything better, right?
Well,
right?
Yeah, I mean, we should definitely hold them to a high standard of performance, and perhaps we don't, but
but that's a huge topic in itself. So, well, that's great. And so your personal, motivation or drive to continuously upgrade or update your skills and domains and your areas of expertise and focus, etc., has served you well. So you've had this progressive career, in this particular case, the gaming domain or entertainment domain. And so now you're at Mythical, and you've been at Mythical for a number of years. And this is an interesting time, right? The pandemic kind of did a whole bunch of things to a whole bunch of parts of society. Gaming was not an exception. It was probably one of the most affected or impacted positively, and then maybe in some cases negatively. And then, of course, the geopolitical issues, high interest rates, inflation, and so on in the last couple of years have played a role in terms of what's happened to that domain. Maybe if you could tell us about the work at Mythical and what's exciting now and how do you see the future, and how maybe even also suggest to deal with the current storm that's going through.
Well, yeah, no problem. The pandemic did change things. It changed things for me. It changed things for a considerable number of people. I think the idea that any of us were going to expect that the pandemic was going to hit us in 2020, none of us were really expecting that to occur. So at the time, I was head of the BattleNet platform group over at Activision Blizzard, and I remember thinking about the news that there was this virus that had pandemic potential. And we were thinking about how to take, our workforce, which was at the time 100% in person, in a couple of locations, and shift them to be virtual in a way that we had never done before. And I remember having those conversations and thinking about, well, I wonder what this is going to do to the macro environment of gaming as well. Of course, we did make the shift. We had a major launch within the first couple of weeks of the pandemic. We were launching what we call a Call of Duty Warzone on the BattleNet platform for the very first time, free-to-play Call of Duty title, which had enormous number of players play Call of Duty, in some cases for the very first time. I mean, it's probably the most successful Call of Duty launch ever in the history of Call of Duties. And it happened to be right on the heels of the pandemic, where people were being, essentially confined to their homes and confined to their internet bandwidth in order to have social interactions and to have interactive entertainment experiences. On launch day, I know that there were certain geo regions in the world that were experiencing a lot of internet lag because people were downloading our giant client at the time. And, to think that, 3 or 4 years later now, so I guess it's been 4 years now to the month, we look back and say, wow, what kind of journey was that? I would say that a couple of things, come to mind for me. I had made the shift as an employee to go work at Meta in Reality Labs during the pandemic. So entirely interviewed online, entirely onboarded online, and I worked from home for a long time. And that was definitely an experience. I think we've all become much more experts at working together face to face in front of a screen all day. But the health implications of that, the work-life balance implications for that, there's a lot of setbacks, a lot of successes, but there's a lot of lessons learned. From an industry standpoint, I left Reality Labs to go work at Mythical. And like you said, I've been there over a year now. The challenges have been in a couple of places. Number one is that, like I said at the very start, people shifted their social interactions and, their entertainment desires, their spending habits to things that were more focused on providing high fidelity experiences, remotely. And so online games were amazing. Like the gaming in general just took off in 2020 and 2021. I think, especially Web3 and the technology around, blockchain being able to be integrated into some of these experiences in order to enhance those experiences and the value that you get out of those experiences just saw amazing growth. NVIDIA has seen amazing growth due to AI. Well, before that, you sort of look at the companies that were benefiting from the pandemic, and you can see Zoom, and you can see all these gaming companies, and you can see some of these Web3s. I think, then of course 2021 comes around towards the end of 2021, and people are like getting vaccinated. Modern science is helping combat the pandemic, and with that we see an opening of people sort of shifting back into perhaps more high fidelity face-to-face interactions that they've been craving for a while. And we have seen a drop off in gaming, and so it's been a tough period of time to move through gaming, that was in Reality Labs focused on the promise of this metaverse, this high fidelity, interactive, fully immersive experience. And now I can, instead of putting on a headset that still kind of looks like a toilet seat that you're wearing, so it's not very fashionable, I can just go see Haresh now, and we can actually interact and actually have a coffee together and not get each other sick. I think this is great. I'm going to go do that. And so it's suppressed some of the excitement for these innovations that I think are still on the horizon. And, we haven't returned to the old days, what I like to call the before times. We haven't returned to those before times. We're not in the end times anymore, like, which was like at the heart of the pandemic. We're now in the after time. And I think the after time is this brand new world of opportunities to where we can see some of those innovations that were funded by that amazing growth start to change a little bit in how they get delivered to the market in a way that's much more conducive to a post-pandemic world, a world in which we can now sort of get back to having a good, healthy mix of in-person and virtual experiences.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, the pandemic was clearly a shock, just shock in all ways, right? And a big shock. And then when that's over, you go through a after effect, right? Or the readjustment. And we'll forever be different as a society, even as a species, probably. There are many, many sectors that have experienced so many changes as a result of the pandemic. Obviously, one of the things that the economists started looking at really closely is the real estate domain, right? Especially office. Like, what the heck's going to happen? And even Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, has said that he expects more regional bank failures because that's where the commercial lending is concentrated. So that's a little scary, actually.
Well, we've had some setbacks as well. I mean, as a VC funded startup, we're well funded. We've been very successful. We've hired almost everybody during the pandemic. So lots of people scattered throughout the world. But, we saw those mid-sized bank failures last year, and it affected VCs. And I think that it caused, VCs to protect their, what we call dry powder, be a little bit more selective about where they fund. Luckily, the vision and mission of Mythical to provide advanced marketplace capabilities into games and entertainment experiences, follows a history of innovation around democratizing gameplay, the notion of free to play. These evolutions are very powerful, widespread, mainstream innovations in gaming, and we're just sort of helping perpetuate all that growth. And so we're in a pretty good spot. I'll say, though, that that's not the case, across the industry. I mean, Meta bet big on the metaverse, and as compelling as I find that as a gamer, because I think gaming is a hero use case of the metaverse. It has been for 20 years, frankly. It's very, very compelling. And that compute platform with glasses in an AR setting, I think, is absolutely going to be the next piece of hardware that we all get used to using from a user interface perspective. Sort of landed flat. I mean, Meta had to pull back and sort of re-articulate itself in a way that, focused on what Zuckerberg has been calling the year of efficiency. And they've done that very well. But I think, sort of back to basics, I think a lot of technology firms are getting into. They're like, let me go back to the basics. And oh, by the way, with a sprinkle of AI, because there's such potential in AI, across technology space that, anyone who's spending money in AI needs to show their work a little bit to try to generate that excitement.
Makes sense. I don't want to repeat a lot of the things we said at our event about a month or so ago. But that was on AI and gaming. But AI has been used in gaming for a long time, just like for, metaverse and gaming being kind of a killer app or early domain, right? Where metaverse and a bunch of technology. I mean, gaming is one of the domains where technology has always been tested, right? It continues to be tested, or that's where the bleeding edge is of technology oftentimes. And so I would expect maybe something similar with AI. But I think if you look at historically how AI has been leveraged in gaming, it's probably been leveraged for some time already, right?
Yes, it has.
That it's just getting to now, and it'll continue to get leveraged. I'm curious as to your thoughts on what that evolution might look like as far as AI affecting gaming, and specifically, democratizing the domain for the producers, not just the consumers.
Well, I think AI, as promising as a technology as I think it is for not just gaming and interactive entertainment, but just for the world, it's going to be about increasing the quality and increasing the speed at which that quality can be delivered to market. That is going to be the critical use case for AI technology and tools in the gaming industry. If you just look at the pain points for gaming, developing a AAA game experience that is beloved by hundreds of millions of players can take literally years of design and development and creation. There is a secret sauce, there is a spark that needs to be found in any game. And I don't think AI is going to take over that piece. but the effort that is taken to experiment along the journey of finding that spark could be significantly improved and the time significantly reduced by allowing an AI to assist you in bringing high quality content to the market faster and doing it with much higher levels of quality and much more consistent and repeated manner. You can turn those cycles of experimentation much, much faster. And that means delivering high quality, beloved content to the market, to your players, to your fans, much faster than you could before. It's going to be human guided. I mean, there's no world in which I think the AI takes over. I just don't view the world in dichotomies, right? It's not like it's either AI or it's either human. I don't subscribe to that. But I think that there are these amazing opportunities in the middle to where human guided power of AI can be brought to the market for gaming, and it can significantly increase the content that comes out for games. It's just like digital animation. If you sort of look back at animation in general for games, there's never been more content made for games than there is today, right? And a lot of the content that's being made right now is done digitally. It's done with AI assisted tools or just digitally assisted tools, like the ability for me to take a 2.5D image and extrapolate that to 3D. That technology has been around for quite some time, and it's used a lot to do things that used to take months of coding in order to deliver a 3D experience can be done in days. And that's great. I mean, that is so amazing. And I don't think it's put anybody out of work. What I think it's done is just made us have to shift our skill set so that we can operate those tools, so that we can use them to their full potential, so that we can increase the amount of content that we provide to people. And guess what? We have no shortage of demand for great AAA game content. They need more content, but they want it to be of high quality. So that demand is there, and we just have to, train ourselves and develop the tools and bring that technology to bear to meet it.
I see. So you're expecting, at least long term, no shortage of work?
None. No. In fact, I'm like I have a daughter in college right now, and I'm like, computer science. Remember how we used to talk about computer science? So keep that going. But I'm like, put an emphasis towards learning AI tool set that can help you deliver code, that can help you develop applications, perhaps all on your own, because the tools are so powerful. And what that does is it increases productivity and output for the economy as a whole, and it increases the fidelity of the experiences that get delivered. It increases the enjoyment of those that are enjoying them. Like I said, it's a great time to be alive. One other innovation that came out of the pandemic that I love to point to is the streaming service. The notion that, there's a couple of things that happened to me personally during the pandemic that, that I've adopted that are now part of my permanent me that I won't go back to pre-pandemic times with. And one of those is all we have are streaming services. We have no cable subscription anymore. And that these streaming services have allowed the targeted creation of amazing content. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I've got Star Trek up here. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Like Disney Plus and Paramount Plus have done an amazing job of delivering super high quality content at a rate that has never been done before. Like if you look at their catalogs, being a Star Wars fan, it's amazing time to be alive. Being a Star Trek fan, it's an amazing time to be alive. And it's because these digital tools have allowed high quality AAA content to be delivered in a much faster pace. And so I get to enjoy a great deal more Star Trek and Star Wars than I ever did in, pre-pandemic times.
Well, I think I would agree. Historically, I was a reader. I'm still a reader. I read a lot of ebooks for some time, but I've gone back to paper books. So maybe compared to Arron, I'm sounding like a Luddite, but in my own comparative way.
I would never say that. Paper books have a place.
In my own comparative way, I do find having a similar experience or reaction that you have, which is all kinds of content is available and accessible, whether that's long tail content from these larger houses that they would not have made available when the cost of distribution was so high, so they can only keep so many SKUs on the shelf, if you want to call it that. But when the cost of distribution is low, they can now make all the SKUs available from eternity of their studios or whatever rights they have. And then it probably compounds the demand or increases the demand for everything that they do, right? Because you'll get curious about other things and so on. I think it's almost like, of course, too much content, right, in a way. And so the one question as a user, you're always, at least I sometimes think about, which is, am I consuming the most engaging and interesting content that I could, that I personally could, right? And maybe there'll be a set of AI tools that'll help me answer that over time, right? So there are a lot of AI tools available for the producers, but maybe for the consumers. I mean, there are, of course, a lot of AI tools already available or being used for the consumers as well. I have a kid who's graduating from college in 6 weeks. I was thinking about similar things as, are we going to run out of work? What skill sets to focus on and so on. And Isha, our daughter, happens to have studied computer science and marine biology. In kind of conversations with Isha, but also with a bunch of other people, AI is going to become pervasive. It'll become like HTTP, right? Nobody's going to think twice. AI tools and AI thinking, everything will be it's just a given in everything that happens, right? Because right now there's that little dichotomy, or it's a big dichotomy, I don't know, between AI and non-AI, but I think it's going to go away very quickly. Right? It's just like with the internet, right? When the internet came into being, then there was no question that whether you'd have an API, whether you'd have an HTTP interface, etc. Obviously, the end users don't call it that, but they just go to their computer or their phone or whatever they're doing. But the whole thing's enabled with TCP/IP. But the marketers, Wall Street, they all love to have buzzwords because they can only fit so many characters, right? So you got to.
Well, and you can make money off the buzzwords. Yeah.
Yeah, but you had .com for a while, and then you had, other things, and then now you have AI, I suppose. So I don't know if you've noticed that, right? A lot of companies now, they change their URLs from XYZ dot whatever com to AI. Yeah, it's a lot more
And it
AI.
used to be, remember Internet of Things, IoT? Like a lot of companies had their domain names .iot,
Yes.
and you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, come on,
Right. Yeah. So we'll end up in this kind of fully transformed universe, right? Which will be not completely as in like non-AI things or humans will go away, but AI will be so pervasive that it won't be talked about as a either or kind of a thing. So one other question I had before we move on to a couple of the other things was just tell us a little bit about Mythical. I know that for a while, or maybe even currently, right, it's leveraging blockchain or enabling blockchain ecosystems for gaming, etc. But just tell us a little bit about Mythical. What gaps in the ecosystem is it filling? What's the vision that it has that gives us an opportunity to contribute value to the ecosystem?
Oh, absolutely. One of the really compelling cases that the founder, John Linden, shared with me, he and I had been talking for a couple of years before I joined, was that there are a couple of evolutions in gaming that have happened over the course of probably the last 10 or 15 years. And it's like the free to play gaming and the notion that, gaming is accessible in ways that never have before been possible. And the vision for Mythical for us is to enable these types of AAA game experiences to have advanced marketplace capabilities built into them. Most of us who've been gaming for, I'd say, any time during the last 2 decades are very familiar with the notion that when I play games, I collect items and I use those items to finish the game. I use those items to participate in the game, and that these items, in many cases, I'm playing World of Warcraft or I'm playing, any number of AAA game experiences. I start to identify with these things that I've collected and earned throughout my experience in the game. The challenge has always been, in some games, they do it pretty well inside of their game ecosystem in terms of I can sell something to Haresh, like I no longer like this sword that I've been using in World of Warcraft. I'm going to give it to you and you're going to give me some gold for it and I'm going to go use it to buy something else inside the game. Inside that game ecosystem, that's normal. Like I think we've all experienced that in gaming. But what happens when I'm done with that game? What happens when I age out of that game? Or what happens if I get married or have a child or go to college and I no longer have the time I used to have to play that game? Do I just walk away from that experience? That principally a very sad moment in a gamer's life is that I can't really play this game anymore. I used to hear from countless Magic the Gathering players back at my time at Wizards who would say, I used to play a lot when I was in college, but then graduated from college and got a job and I can't play as much. And so, I don't get together with my friends. And so what Mythical is trying to do is give players a way to take all of that they earned and all of that they played with and they valued so greatly and find someone else that can use it and find someone else that perhaps would value it as much or maybe even more than they do, and to be able to sell it to them and do that in a way that creates a very safe transaction for both players, and it allows that player who is getting out of the game to get something in return for all that energy and all that time that they put into it. Not just the experience itself, but there's like a residual value that they can now take with them and move on to a different experience and move on to a different game, perhaps. Like I tend to play only one main game at a time and maybe have a second game that I interact with on a more casual basis. But when I'm done with that game, sort of I play, I was paying, and then I walk away. And it's a pretty terrible experience to walk away from something that I put so much time and energy into for perhaps years. What I'm really trying to help bring about in the industry, and I'm doing it at Mythical because, John agrees with this vision, is that instead of gaming just being a consumption-based entertainment experience, what if it were a consumer durable-based entertainment experience? So we take the economic principles of consumption and consumer durables and we say, what if we could really make it so that it's a consumer durable experience that people have? It's almost as if their investment, they can make that sword even more valuable while they're playing because it's the sword that won that tournament and it's verifiable and it's guaranteed. And somebody out there wants that sword, just like somebody out there might want my collectible collection of trading card games. So it's sort of like, what if my experiences are valuable to others as well? And asking a single company to create that capability, they face the classic innovator's dilemma of why would I invest in that potential for them leaving my game? Instead, I'm just going to put money into that game. And so what Mythical is doing is it's creating an ecosystem by which players and games can sort of join that ecosystem and they can have this intermixed market that does not affect the gameplay at all and the game design play at all. And so, that's where blockchain comes into it. Blockchain is just a piece of technology from our standpoint. We rarely even talk about blockchain as a technology. It's just a database, a replacement. But what it does is it allows the public, the participants of that marketplace, to verify the authenticity of those objects. Like that sword is the sword. And it's not the company telling me that it's that sword and that they promise they'll never make a new one. It's like, no, I can tell that one is the sword and it's always going to be that sword. Now, there's a lot of business models that kind of capability unlocks for players, for creators, for user-generated content, which is a very big industry trend. And so we're pretty excited about the opportunities and potential that our technology brings to the gaming industry.
Yeah, that does sound exciting and unique. I'm not a gamer, so I'm not as probably plugged into what all might be happening there. Well, good. I had mentioned earlier, and we did talk about it a little bit, to talk about, setbacks, right? And if you're constantly adapting, you started out with a paper route, probably your first setback was when you can't do it anymore, whether it was because that could have been for a good reason. So maybe not a setback, but maybe you went to college or something, or you got a better job, right? So in your career, etc., you must have, had many times when you found maybe meta was the time when there was a change that was presented to you that you didn't want and it wasn't desirable. And then you had to pick up the pieces or regroup and overcome those. And, as you manage teams, how do also encourage or guide the teams into thinking about failures and risk taking and setbacks and how to use those as growth opportunities and for, creating more resilience into the future?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's one that's always on my mind. I subscribe to the notion of being anti-fragile. The idea that I'm not attempting to build resilience to change. In fact, what I'm trying to do is leverage change to improve. And the notion that it's just like working out. I think perhaps many of us, and myself included, had physical setbacks as a result of the pandemic. I couldn't go to the gym anymore. The gyms were closed and I'm sitting at home more often. I'm not walking between meetings. I'm not, going to the office as much. Right. And so how do I deal with that setback? I started adopting things like, virtual fitness. I started working out with my Quest headset on, and Beat Saber and Supernatural and these games, my Apple Watch is telling me I'm close to death sometimes when I'm doing those things because they're such a great workout. Certain things like Peloton and Tonal, became much more mainstream as ways for us to have a gamified fitness experience in our homes. And I got to tell you, I have since sort of changing my mindset and moving towards this, sort of taking the anti-fragility to the next step and actually building more muscle, tearing the muscle in order to build it bigger and better. My fitness has improved better than it's been in decades as a result of those changes. And so that's like a not a non-work related example of how anti-fragility can work with the human body. But the same can be applied to your career. Like I had setbacks numerous times in my career. Bosses that I didn't see eye to eye with, sometimes, changing company strategy. Like I said, I joined Wizards to open retail stores, and within a few years, we were closing those retail stores. Knowing that those are difficult moments and that we do need to make a shift, quickly identifying where I think that shift is going to go, and doing the gap analysis between where I am and where I think I need to be in order to take advantage of that opportunity became part of the regular conversation I'm having with myself all the time. Trying to look ahead and say, and not resting comfortably on the notion that perhaps I'm in a resilient space or I have developed some kind of resilience to market changes or randomness, but rather always approaching it like this is just part of the workout. This is just another exercise for me that in some cases is going to require a lot of work. And it's not going to look like I'm making a lot of progress, but staying focused on my goal and understanding that every time I'm making a mistake or I have a setback, that is a learning opportunity for me to apply to my body of knowledge as I'm moving forward with this notion of being anti-fragile. And so everything that's thrown at me becomes part of what I'm going to be able to respond to and change myself towards so that I can go after the things that I have personal affinity for and feel that I can make a productive impact.
Yeah, I guess you need some overloading injuries and then the muscle rebuilds bigger, better, right? So
it does. We don't get better when things are going really well. I think about that a lot. Like I smile when I'm working out, but it doesn't mean it's easy.
or painless, yeah.
Right? It's not painless. It's not painless. And
Yeah.
there are setbacks. Injuries happen, all kinds of stuff. But it's the same approach that I take with my career. And, like I've had bosses, I think we've all had bosses that we've worked for that were like, don't necessarily agree with or are fully aligned with. I mean, it's probably never the case, right? But what I will say is that there's always something that you can learn from someone. Always something you can learn from someone. There's always something you can learn from a specific situation, even if you don't agree. Perhaps you're learning what you won't do in this situation next time. Perhaps you're learning that the way that this person you're working with is handling that particular crisis is something that you won't do yourself ever, right? So like these are still things that are part of the body of knowledge that make you a better leader. They make you a better performer, and they give you more opportunities to be successful if you can grab hold of them and apply them.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. It's a good framework.
It's a good book. Anti-Fragile is a good book too.
There you go. Stepping back. We've talked a lot about work, a lot of your journey, etc. How do you keep life balance and what's interesting outside of work?
Raising kids is a part of it. I have a wonderful partner. My spouse is also in the games industry. She's very successful. She and I share a lot of context around the journey. For her in particular, I think her journey I have found inspiration from on a number of occasions because I happen to be in a position that society has said is perhaps a little bit easier because I'm male and because, I come from, I'm American. I sort of was born and raised here. She is not. And so, she's got a lot of things that she's had to overcome that I've drawn inspiration from. So she's been a hugely positive influence in my life.
Where does she come from?
She's Persian, born in Tehran, raised in France, and came to the United States for college. So she's had to overcome quite a bit. And there's a lot there, from a, sort of knowledge perspective, wisdom perspective that, she shared with me. But I've been on the journey with her, not the whole time for sure, definitely been on the journey alongside her and drawing inspiration from. I spend a lot of time with my kids. I've got one that's in college right now, so she's not a kid anymore. And I've got a son at home. He's 10. So we do a lot of outdoors, Cub Scouts. Again, though, anti-fragility sort of follows me everywhere I go. And I try to help my kids learn those valuable lessons about how that hard work does matter. It's not going to be an easy path, but it will be a productive path if you stay focused on your goals and if you power through the setbacks and look for ways to leverage those setbacks into the next success that you will have. That can happen on the hiking trail, believe it or not. It can happen while camping,
Of
in
course.
the woods. It happens while we work out. It happens, in school, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. I get a lot of satisfaction from making a difference in their lives. Parents, I think, would agree with me. Although the math doesn't add up, I'll tell you, it's 90% work for the 10% joy you can't get anywhere else. And I think that that's a big part of my life right now.
I see. When it comes to children, there's show and tell, right? So they listen to, or they appear to listen to a few of our words, but they watch us all the time, and they
They
will
do.
emulate us in many ways, right? So,
They do.
so a lot of it is maybe a few of the words, but is us trying to live what we think they should do or how they should be, right? That matters, and if we don't, then that might sink in as well. But if you're practicing what you're preaching, right, then there's less confusion.
What they decide to do, I will certainly have suggestions, but I'm not going to be the yes or no parent.
Of
What I'm going
course.
to be is
Of course.
here's the mindset you should have, the anti-fragile mindset, the hard work ethos, the honesty, and being true to
Yeah.
yourself and to others. These things are important as part of constructing a solid, productive, good-natured human being. And then they can make all the decisions that they want to make inside of that framework. And they will be successful by their own measure, not mine.
Yeah, the right foundation, right? The right framework and the right foundation so that the individual decisions, etc., that's not what you're trying to influence necessarily.
Correct. Because that's a no-win scenario.
I was talking to another friend over the weekend about this over a walk or a hike, actually. Generationally, context is so different, right? We're 30, 40 years removed from the time of our children being at the same age. So there's just no way individually. So we can have an opinion sometimes depending on how much listening we've done about the context that they're facing to make a particular decision. But there's no way we could pretend to make better decisions, right, at the individual decision level. But anything else you're kind of prioritizing or involved in, whether it's causes or hobbies or anything of note that might be interesting?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of ensuring that we have diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, in the technology industry, in the games industry. It's a journey. It's not a destination. We certainly haven't arrived at it. And it's going to take a lot of effort from leaders and continued focus to lean in and to ensure that we are, in fact, trying to make a difference, trying to improve the lives of those that contribute greatly to the success of these industries. I'm a big fan of that, big proponent of it. I spend a lot of time on it because it needs it, and it will need it for the rest of my career and beyond. And so I think it's just a mindset that I'm constantly trying to ensure that I'm spreading in the right ways so that we can make a difference. I'm enjoying a couple of games still. Like I said, my son and I spend a lot of time outdoors on the weekends, and I'm spending 80, 90 hours a week at Mythical trying to see this next evolution of gaming be successful and get that flywheel moving.
So do you count your playtime as mythical time?
No. Despite what a lot of my kids' friends would say, "Oh, you work in games, it must be play games all day." And I'm like, no, actually, unfortunately, that's not the case. But no, I mean, it happens to be a personal affinity of mine. So it does make the 80 or 90 hours a week or whatever it is, it does make it more enjoyable because I feel like I'm having a difference on something that is meaningful to me. It would be like working on Star Trek or working on Star Wars or working at Bungie, on Destiny 2, which is one of my favorite games. Or I've been playing Red Dead Redemption 2 recently, and so working at Rockstar would be like that too. It's like, I've still got a real job. My job as the chief operating officer is to try to help make the business, successful and have a business flywheel moving. And so, no, I'm not playing any games, but knowing that what I'm doing is enabling, these games to be successful and for millions of players to have fun playing these games. It definitely does sort of turn the little crank inside my heart, makes it enjoyable.
That's good, right? It sounds like there's a lot of overlap. Hopefully it would be for all of us between work and play.
Absolutely.
Right. And we mentioned this a little bit earlier in our earlier conversations, right? So I run a team at High Tech Advisors, and our kind of emotional motivation is that we help map meaningful problems to people who find them meaningful to solve. And that's kind of a succinct way to say it, but there's a lot more to it. And some of it kind of you've touched on in using, your own words. But, we get one journey as far as anybody truly knows, I think, on this earth.
Yes, exactly.
And so if you have the opportunity and the luxury and the luck to make choices as to what you do for a living, hopefully it aligns with, what you would do for play, right? Or for fun. And then, hopefully it also covers the necessities, your mortgage, your food bill, and so on, healthcare and so on. And then it's this, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Then you're focused on these higher levels of realization, right? Or awareness, I guess, that you could reach. The other side, which is a little bit scary usually for me, but if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to play the guest.
My question for you, as somebody who has, a wide audience of influential points, I would love to get your perspective on what you think, AI will provide to society as a whole. Are you thumbs up on it? Like, do you think that there are some watch outs that we need to have as a society as we try to embrace innovation? Like, I'd love your wider perspective on it, because a lot of the people I speak to are just in the games business and we're like, yay, this is amazing,
I can share my perspective. I wouldn't probably consider myself an authority on answering this question, but we have talked to, and I have had a chance to learn from a lot of people in many domains about AI and kind of how people are thinking about it. My perspective is that we can't be scared of it, right? Because it's like the genie's out of the bottle. It's not going to go back in the bottle, right? So I'm not personally scared of it. When it comes to what can happen with AI across all domains, one is, of course, it's going to do a lot of good. Mm-hmm. Right? It's able to create these entertainment experiences that you just couldn't do using humans, whether it's human muscle or human brains or just even sheer number of humans. There are things that AI can do that humans just can't do without AI. And that's just in entertainment. But if you look at any domain, whether it's publishing or gaming or healthcare, finance, real estate, transportation, shipping, there's just going to be a whole bunch of experiences and utilization that you're going to be able to achieve that you're not going to be able to achieve without AI. So I think that case is clear, right? And that's why most people have been working on this for as long as they have. The second part, which is, what is the risk? So there's one risk that's not unique to AI. It's there for anything that's powerful, that is controlled by humans, which is basically, what will bad human actors, be able to do with this powerful tool, right? So that's that arms race between the good guys and the bad guys that's been going on since humans have been around, right? And maybe it goes on in other species too. And so in that case, we just have to, probably as a layperson, have trust that the good guys will continue to be ahead, right? Whether it's our law enforcement or military or whoever. Maybe our, corporate stakeholders and so on. If that is not the case, it's probably then a question of prioritization and investment that the society needs to make. It's kind of like physically, you don't want to be unsafe. So if you're not physically safe, then most of the things don't matter. So that means wherever you're spending your resources, you need to spend less and put more on safety. But there are a lot of gnarly questions around governance, who's in charge, who's going to decide, which we've had before in law enforcement, in military, in the government, around transparency and, enablement or empowerment, etc. And who, like in the nuclear weapons days, right? Who holds the button to retaliate against a nuclear actor, right? Speaking of streaming content, there's one that came out on Netflix called Turning Point, the bomb in the Cold War, which I recommend you might enjoy it. It goes through the development of the atomic bomb in World War II, and then the aftermath, right, which became the Cold War. And one thing that's interesting, sometimes people like to use the analogy between atomic weapons and AI. When they were building the atomic bomb, there was no question that the government was in charge. A private company wasn't going to. I don't know what the laws would have said, but no private company had the means to be able to pull off Groves, the general in charge of the Manhattan Project in the U.S., was able to pull off with acting on behalf of the government, right? Which at one point it had 600,000 employees, the Manhattan Project, right? It's pretty much spread out across all the states, right? And so, whereas in AI now, actually, it's interesting because the government actually not even nearly as, I don't know what the right word is, enabled. Because the compute that lies in the data centers of Microsoft's and Google's and Amazon's and Apple's and Meta, and then, of course, the chip makers, etc., there's a lot more compute that's leveraged and directed towards AI that is residing outside of government buildings than inside. Mm-hmm. So that's like saying the Manhattan Project's happening now, but it's not happening in the government.
That's right.
with AI, if you want to think of it, that analogy, right, between nuclear weapons and AI. And so that's a new territory for society, right? Because the whole idea of governance and accountability, it's going to be different, or it is different. Now, that touches on the third leg, right? So first is what good can AI do for you? The second is what can bad actors with powerful AI can do to everybody else? And the third piece, which is rogue AI, right? Now, and that touches on, or that ties in with the fact that more private companies are now having the ability to take this powerful tool forward rather than the government, right? So if that is happening, and then AI itself, this digital intelligence itself starts having sentience or agency or its own goals, then what happens? So to kind of answer your question about, again, what I think of AI in general, that doesn't scare me as much, right? So good AI, I'm all for it. Bad actors with powerful AI, that's scary. So now we're going to have to rely on our own governance and kind of societal framework and foundations to deal with that, to make sure the criminals, don't destroy society. But that risk gets amplified as the tools get more powerful. But rogue AI, I'm not worried about, right? I don't think you're going to have this thing where, this super digital intelligence that also has the physical aspects, 5, 10, 20 years from now, that's going to say Arron and Haresh are redundant. They're not only redundant, they're actually in the way of my goals.
As popularized in many mainstream movies, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I don't think that's
There's no
super.
Skynet coming. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that I'm not as worried about. I do think that there are a lot of, just like with many, many transitions, we're going to go through a lot of kind of short and medium term issues, right? Whether it's privacy damage due to bad actors having these more powerful tools. And each domain has its own set of issues it's always working through. And then maybe in 5 or 10 years, once we're, all further down this journey, maybe there'll be other things that'll come up on our horizon, just like when the internet came up on the horizon.
Show me an innovation. I challenge anyone to show me an innovation that humanity came up with that we dealt with properly when it first came out. Like, I think, there's always been an innovation challenge that we have faced as a society where, the atomic bomb to AI analogy is, it can be scary for some people to do that. But I mean, if you look at some of these other innovations that have come out that I would say have had a enormous impact on society, we haven't necessarily figured out how to handle them. I mean, if you go back to the automobile, as an analogy for even Web3 technology, a lot of people say Web3 technology is bad for the environment. It's, of all the compute power needed to do these really old models, like they just don't understand, truly how Web3 has evolved. But back in the day when Henry Ford was making the car, I mean, his customers were like, what's wrong with the horse? Like the horse ranchers were like, horses are great. Let's innovate on horses. And the horse ranchers looking at the car saying it's trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. I mean, and I hear that sometimes, on Web3, it's trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. And it's like, well, all innovations solve a problem that perhaps not everyone knew existed. And it solves a problem in terms of an opportunity it creates. Like it creates an opportunity that, if you took away that opportunity, now you have a problem. Like the internet, same thing. I mean, the notion that, it solved a bunch of problems that people were trying to solve is not true. It created a bunch of brand new opportunities. And I think the same will be for AI. Yes, there are parallels to some, potential, like you said, bad actors use innovations in ways that we as a society need to make sure that we're tracking. I think government has shown it's very slow to be able to respond to innovation. Just look at social media and how the US government is trying to figure out what to do with social media. And there's plenty of bad actors in social media. It's, and we have hearings and stuff that like there are no actual laws, in place that to help guide that innovation. So
Yeah. And I recently have been looking at my taxes, and a lot of us have, right? Because that time of the year. And it's like, forget the fact that there's too many rules and complications in the actual rules of taxation, but the technology is there so that it can be largely automated. I was like, why isn't there a button that I push that says let's import everything from last year's taxes, right? I could do that probably in TurboTax or whatever, but why can I not do that if I'm not a customer of a private company, etc.
It
But
seems like AI would be well applied to prepare taxes.
yeah, well, you don't even need AI, right? This could have been done decades ago, right?
Well, I do think they make so many subtle changes to the tax code every year that some level of human intuition is required to resolve them, because there are
Of
issues
course,
that
of course.
they punt, and they have to punt to a court to apply some kind of society intuition on it before they decide what they're going to do with it. And
Yeah.
we know that AI is not great at human intuition, not yet anyway. And
No,
so,
not yet, not yet,
yeah.
not yet. So, well, this has been wonderful.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for having me again. Like, I always love speaking with you. I love what you do. And I'm excited to hear the next episode as well, because, it seems like, in my own journey of being anti-fragile and a lifelong learner, I'm just hungry for content, hungry for good information and the wisdom. And you seem to be tapping into that, in a wide way. So thank you for
Well,
having me.
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Aaron, for being here. And I think you've given us a very good set of things to let percolate in our heads, anti-fragile and being on the lookout for change, not just reactive change, but proactive change and how to leverage that to
Hmm.
better ourselves as professionals and as people. But I really appreciate it. And it was fun. And hopefully we'll do it again after some time. We'll look forward to. Until then, we'll be looking forward to what your teams and you're doing in between.
Yeah, I can't wait to give you the exciting updates.
All right, Aaron. Thank you.